happens when a Las Vegas Reformed Jewish rabbi and a Las Vegas Presbyterian pastor have a conversation as friends. They discover that no matter where you live or what you believe, faith matters. In this episode of Faith Matters, Rabbi Sanford Akselrad from Congregation near Tamid and Reverend Adrian from Green Valley Presbyterian Church talk about preparing for the upcoming Jewish High Holy Days and how they usher in a time of repentance and introspection. Both spiritual leaders say, when soul-searching, we learn that repentance is a return to God, a return to oneself, and a time to recognize our imperfections.
Hey, Sandy, good to see you.
All right, Adrian, good to be back. How are you?
I am really good. It is always a joy to be with you as we look to the fall. I know that we are coming up to some very significant days for your community, your congregation, and I would love to talk about those with you today.
All right. I thought you were going to say, well, how are you doing? And I was going to say, as my wife says, these are the happy time of years where the rabbis everywhere get stressed writing our holiday sermons and
Right?
making preparations, and somehow things just kind of pile on right before the Jewish high holidays. But yeah, it's good. So this is a major period of time in Judaism as we greet our new year, which by itself confuses a lot of people. We have in America, we have the Gregorian calendar, but Jews have a lunar calendar, which means that although the dates of our holidays always remain the same on our Jewish calendar, as they're translated into the solar calendar, they come out different. So this year, the holidays are, quote, late. October 2nd, in the evening, will begin Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year, the Jewish New Year. And followed by about 10 days later, Yom Kippur, the Day of Repentance, followed 5 days later by the festival of Sukkot, and that lasts about a week. And then we have Simchas Torah, and the celebration of our Torah and its meaning and values. So just saying that, I'm tired.
Yeah, of course you are. And this really, right now, we're in a season. This is a very special month for you, is it not? This is a month of preparation, of reflection.
Right. So it's the month of Elul, and the month lasts 30 days, and then it will lead into Tishrei, which will be the start of the calendar year for Rosh Hashanah. But the idea is that on Rosh Hashanah, which begins that 10 days of repentance, you don't just walk in and say, hey, God, I'm ready to turn over a new leaf. I'm sorry for what the stuff I did wrong. You want to have a period of time of reflection. Think about it when you were young and you did something wrong, but you'd say, I'm sorry. But your parents could tell you didn't really think about it. Mm-hmm. So they'd look at you and they'd send you to your room and they'd say, think about it. So it's as if God's going to us, think about it. Think about the year that was past, the people that you wronged, the values that you didn't embrace or you strayed from, and how you might make amends. And if you think you're going to figure that out in a moment, no, it's going to require deeper soul searching. So each day of Elul, we're encouraged to take time out for reflection and introspection. And then when Rosh Hashanah comes along, now we are spiritually ready to begin that process.
And if I could ask you, what does that preparation look like? Is that something that takes place at temple? Does it take place at home as well?
So I would say in a very Orthodox setting, they would have certain extra prayers that are offered daily in their morning prayers, and they would actually blow the ram's horn, that's called the shofar, every morning. So for non-Orthodox, say for example, Reform, we don't have those types of services. So the reflection is more on our own, where I
Mm.
encourage people from the pulpit to take this time, or from my writings, to do that work on your own. But there isn't necessarily a liturgical component that my members would follow that say, hey, but in a more traditional setting, there would be, and it would kind of make them more mindful. And so it's hard in the sense that people have so many things on their mind to get them to take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, even a minute to just sit there and reflect. But that's why we talk about it. That's the goal. And I think as we get closer and closer to Rosh Hashanah itself, the magic, so to speak, sits in, and people realize, yeah, I better pay attention. I better pay attention.
And I think it's one of those things, at least from my experience as a Christian, that we know we're supposed to do it and we do it in seasons, and then we fail to do that type of thing, that regular quiet work with God, of listening, of reflecting. And yet when we do it regularly, it just becomes so natural. It becomes something which feeds us as we prepare ourselves, I would imagine in your tradition as well, to receive God's grace again.
So one of the hallmarks of the Jewish high holidays is repentance.
Yes.
But what's interesting is non-traditional Jews, maybe even traditional Jews, don't realize that in our daily prayers, there is a prayer for repentance.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing that comes to my mind is, if there's a daily prayer for repentance, then what's the big deal about the high holidays? Why is it the World Series of Prayer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's human nature. Like, you're a cherished friend, but you have a birthday. And on that birthday, we have a cake and we sing to you and we give you presents and we make you feel extra special. Where in reality, I should be making you feel, as a friend, extra special every day. It's the same kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
We should be involved in introspection, in reflection, and in the process of seeking forgiveness every day. But in having this holy time dedicated to it, it makes us that much more mindful. And by golly, we're going to really put an effort to doing it. So people often ask, and I think we can compare, because I think there is a difference in our tradition, some similarities, but difference. When we
Yes.
talk about forgiveness, or repentance rather, the Hebrew word is teshuvah, teshuvah. And Hebrew is an interesting language that within the Hebrew word itself are often layers of meaning. So tshuva means repentance. It's related to the root of return, and it's related to the word answer. How about that? So for us, repentance is a return to God, and it's also a return to oneself. And it is also a process of introspection, and it's a searching for answers, which means you have to start by asking questions. What did I do right? What did I do wrong? Who did I wrong? How could I be a better human being, a better Jew? How do I make the world better? And so forth. And the process is that prayers seek to make amends between us and God, but for things that we have done with a fellow human being, we have to actually go to them and identify what we've done and say, I'm sorry for doing A, B, C, and resolve never to do it again, so that the apology is sincere. And once you identify what you've done wrong, what you resolve not to do it again, and then you've gone to the person, that is the process of tshuva that we hope for. And again, going back to the
Speak about that.
analogy of when we're young, and you say, go apologize to Timothy, Mikey, and Mikey says, I'm sorry, and there's no thought.
Right.
So you want to have that thought, you want that sincerity, and it is not easy. It's
No.
not easy when you go to someone and admit that you have messed up. And I think when you are really sincere, it is changing, because to admit fault is not in the natural human norm, right?
Right.
To recognize our imperfection. But I'm curious, in Christianity, I think there's probably a nuanced difference in that process.
Well, there is that teaching within the scriptures, and if I was a real scholar, I could tell you the exact place where it's said, but it does, we're told that if you have sin against your brother, like, stop, don't even bring your sacrifice to the altar. Turn around, go make amends with your brother, ask for forgiveness, then come and ask God for forgiveness. So to be recipients of forgiveness, as you talked about earlier, does call us to extend forgiveness and also to seek forgiveness when we've done wrong. Not just that God would forgive us, but also we're called to say, hey, Sandy, would you forgive me when I did this wrong? I apologize. I'm sorry. I know I hurt you.
I think when people do that, and there is a true friendship and respect, it only deepens.
Mm-hmm.
But if the other person says, I'm not forgiving you, what does your tradition say then? Maybe they're still too angry, or they don't believe your apology is sincere.
What I say to people is, I realize that you may not be ready to forgive right now, and it may feel premature right now for you, but until you forgive that person, and some of us need time to work through the anger, the hurt, the disappointment, the pain. But when we forgive, we're releasing ourselves from this heavy, heavy burden, right? We're carrying this weight. And so when we forgive, we're the ones that are really being freed because we're carrying this weight. Sometimes the person we're so angry with doesn't even remember the incident, right? But when it's a real vile crime, I think sometimes we can do wrong to say, okay, you have to forgive that person. Someone needs time to work through the pain, the hurt. And as I also say, to forgive someone doesn't necessarily mean that they're immune from consequences. But we say, I recognize that when I forgive you, it's the recognition that as a human, I have the same propensity to do the same thing. And I may not want to admit that, but that's to be human.
You can forgive doesn't mean you have to forget.
Right, right. Yeah.
Bear a grudge or to have unexpressed anger towards someone, I find that that's a heavy baggage to carry. And as you point out, when you internalize that and you have either not told someone that your feelings were hurt and giving them the opportunity to apologize, expecting them to be mind readers, or to withhold it yourself, all of these things form a dynamic that ultimately is not really healthy in a relationship. And it's not healthy for the person who holds in that anger and that grudge. And it's not healthy for the person who really is trying to turn their lives around and change and being, repelled by someone that they really care about.
I think some of the most interesting work that was done on the topic of reconciliation forgiveness for me comes from Desmond Tutu in the days after apartheid in South Africa, where, he takes the apartheid regime to task but he's also willing to say that forgiveness comes when we move forward together and we make reconciliation, that we have to work together on this, that it's a process. And I think those are lessons that all of us need to be reminded of.
That's probably one of the greatest examples in human history, if you think about it, because when he got into power, he could have taken the path of revenge.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow, in his greatness, he pointed that country towards reconciliation, as you said.
Yeah.
And they were so much better off, all the people, all the lives that were spared. Great example, Adrian, great example.
Jesus tells this story about this, and it's a parable, and he tells this powerful story about a servant who's in debt, and he asks his master for forgiveness, and he's forgiven, and then that servant turns around and he sees someone else, and he says, "You owe me this much money, and if you don't give it to me, then I'm going to have you punished." And the master gets very, very upset. The lesson being, if you've been forgiven, you have a God-given mandate to forgive others. And I think that is something that's a story that Jesus tells, but that is a truth that both of our traditions affirm.
Absolutely. Well, the time goes by too quickly. So
I think the next time we need to talk further about these high holy days, because these are very special days, but I think we've talked about the preparation, and I think that's very, very good for our listeners.
Well, you'll forgive me if we have to end. That's a good rabbi pun. You'll forgive me if we have to end our podcast at this juncture. But we thank our gentle listeners for once again tuning into our podcast. And again, if faith matters to you, we hope that matters of faith enter your lives, embrace you with feelings of love, and that if there are people in your lives that you have some regrets of things that you have said or done, that you take this time to ask for their forgiveness and the opportunity to grow as friends and as human beings. So again, thanks so much for listening. Shalom, everyone. Peace to you.
Shalom.
Faith Matters features Rabbi Sanford Akselrad from Congregation Yer Tamid and Reverend Adrian Dahl from Green Valley Presbyterian Church and is produced by Leslie Snadowsky. We hope you join us again for our next podcast episode of Faith Matters.